Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Responding to the Opioid Crisis, National and Local Approaches. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn more about this important topic. My name is Steve Collins. I'm a Senior Program Associate at the Justice Programs Office at American University. This webinar is being brought to you by the National Drug Court Resource Center, the go-to place for drug court practitioners to access a wide variety of resources to ensure the programs operate as effectively as possible. The Resource Center can be accessed online at www.ndcrc.org. Before we get started, I want to go over how this webinar will work today. All attendees are currently muted. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit it using the Q&A panel located to the right side of the webinar screen. We have set aside a few minutes at the end of today's webinar to address any questions that come up. If you have a question that we're not able to get to, there will be a brief survey at the end of the webinar that includes an option to submit additional questions. Additionally, please don't hesitate to email us at ndcrc@american.edu, and we will endeavor to quickly provide you with an answer to your question. We would appreciate it if you could fill out the survey even if you don't have extra questions. It will help us improve future webinars and should only take a minute. Today's webinar is being live captioned. To access this feature, just click on the multimedia viewer icon on the top right of your screen. As a final note, this webinar is also being recorded and will be posted on the Justice Programs Office YouTube channel and the Resource Center website. Next slide, please. I'm very excited today to be joined by a great group of presenters. Greg Turay, a policy advisor at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, and Tim Jeffries, a senior policy advisor, also from BJA, will be giving an overview of BJA's current initiatives to address the opioid crisis. Next up, we have Emil Afsa and Jane Kavanaugh, who are statewide task coordinator in New Jersey, and who will be discussing risk factors and symptoms of an opioid overdose, as well as some of the opioid overdose prevention steps being taken in their state. The last presentation of today's webinar will focus on an overview of Buffalo, New York's Opioid Intervention Court by Jeff Smith, the project director for the 8th Judicial District, and Judge Craig Hanna, the Buffalo City Court Judge that currently presides over the program. With that, it is my pleasure to briefly introduce Greg Turay and Tim Jeffries. Mr. Turay currently serves as a drug court policy advisor for BJA. Prior to working at BJA, Mr. Turay worked at the Substance Abuse and Mental Services Administration, or SAMHSA, in multiple roles, including as public health advisor within SAMHSA's Center for Substance Abuse and Treatment, where he provided government oversight to a portfolio of 50 specialty court grantees. Mr. Turay also has experience as a behavioral health clinician within the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services Drug Court Program in Baltimore City. Mr. Jeffries served as Senior Policy Advisor for Drug Policy for BJA. He recently worked to establish the first comprehensive opioid abuse program, a training and technical assistance collaborative, in response to the nation's emerging drug trends. As Senior Policy Advisor and Drug Treatment Subject Matter Expert, Mr. Jeffries guides BJA's training and technical assistance on a wide range of policy issues following the Sequential Intercept model. Thank you both so much for being with us today. Please take it away, Greg.
All right, thanks, Steve, and welcome, everybody. Again, like you said, my name is Gregory Turay. I am the policy advisor for the Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program. Again, I want to welcome you all and thank you for attending. We can go to the next slide. So what I'll be over here, giving a little bit of data related to the opioid crisis and how it's impacting the United States, BJA efforts to address the opioid crisis. I'll talk a little bit more about the Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program and how it impacts the opioid crisis, specifically focusing on the special conditions that was recently put in place this last year, MAT, and also our BJA TTA Collaboratives, our technical assistance collaboratives, and what they do in terms of addressing the opioid crisis. Next slide. So in 2006, there were more than 64,000 deaths due to drug overdose, which was an increased by like 12,000 deaths from 2015. The most hardest hit states were West Virginia, Ohio, New Hampshire, District of Columbia, and Pennsylvania. For West Virginia, for every 52 individuals, 52 people, there was 100,000 represented. For every 100,000 people, I'm sorry, there was 52 who died. For Ohio, it was 39, both Ohio and New Hampshire. And for D.C., for every 100,000 people, 38 people died. In Pennsylvania, 37 died when 100 of the population. And looking at the chart in front of you, one of the things that you'll notice that immediately stands out is the blue section where from 2015 to 2016, there was a big raise, a big increase in the number of overdose deaths. What I want you to look at as we look at this chart, looking at starting at 2001 to 2011, over a 10-year span, it was increased by 20,000 deaths, going from 20,000 to 40,000, which was a pretty moderate increase. But when you look at 2014 to 2016, there was a huge increase that has been impacting the United States as it relates to this CDC data for opioid abuse. Next slide. Okay, among the 64,000 overdoses that were estimated in 2016, 20,000 of those were related to fentanyl and fentanyl analogs. Again, looking at the chart below that represents the overdose deaths, what's highlighted in the blue section of the CDC data, if you look at from 2013, looking at that blue line for synthetic opioids, which we're referring to as the fentanyl, you can see there was a huge increase from 2013 to 2016, going from approximately 2,600 deaths in 2013 to over 20,000 deaths, increase of 17,000, a little over 17,000 deaths, which also shows the impact of not just overdose drugs, but looking at fentanyls and its increase in those numbers. Next slide. Okay, so what is BJA doing in terms of address this effort? So in FY 2017, BJA awarded 103 grants, totaling $46.2 million. 24 of that was with the new BJA COPE program, which Tim will be talking about a little bit later. And what we know is that in $22.2 million for the Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program. And these programs were looking to help regulatory, law enforcement, public health agencies address this crisis, looking at addressing misuse of opioids, reducing crime, and the main piece is saving lives. Next slide. So defining drug courts. So what are drug courts and what have drug courts been able to do? Well, the first drug court was started in 1989 in Miami, Florida, looking to address recidivism. Then drug courts began to serve as an alternative to incarceration for those offenders who had substance abuse issues. And drug courts provide intensive treatment and other supportive services required to sustain sobriety. Currently, there are over 3,100 drug courts operating within the United States, ranging from adult drug courts to co-occurring courts, veteran treatment courts, and so on. Next slide. So what is the goal of the drug court program or the Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program? It is to provide financial and technical assistance to state courts, local courts, units of the local government, and Indian tribe governments to develop and implement drug courts and veteran treatment courts. And these courts effectively integrate evidence-based substance abuse treatment, mandatory drug testing, sanctions and incentives, and nutritional services, judicially supervised court settings with jurisdictions over offenders to reduce recidivism and substance abuse and prevent overdoses. Next slide. So in terms of one of the things that was implemented within the new grant this year was our special conditions. The role of the special conditions was to make sure that if you're applying for this grant that you would agree to extend services or substance abuse treatment and related services to those who had substance opioid abuse issues. Now, what I want to note that funding was not limited to opioid abuse reduction, and applicants may focus on serving offenders with addiction to other drugs and alcohol in addition to addressing opioid abuse reduction. But what this means is, although you may be a state, let's say you're a state in Montana, or let's say you're in Montana, and your primary drug of choice within your state or within your drug court is methadone or is alcohol. What that means is you can continue to, with this funding, address your drug of choice, but when applying or when you're receiving a BJA grant, you have to be able to also indicate that you'll be providing services for individuals who had opioid abuse disorder. Next slide. Okay. According to a report through CDC, 91 Americans die of opioid overdose a day, huge number. Drug courts are an effective resource for delivering structured treatment to offenders with opioid addiction, and BJA supports drug courts that target this population and allow its grantees to use funds for MAT. As of September 30th of 2016, 89 grantees provided MAT to at least one drug court participant, which was up from 62 in December of 2015, which was an increase of about 40% in the number of grantees providing MAT. Next slide. Okay. Now, what is MAT? MAT is use of medication with counseling and behavioral therapies to treat substance abuse and prevent opioid overdose. MAT is an evidence-based treatment protocol primarily for addiction to opioids. And studies that we've seen have indicated that MAT is the most effective intervention to treat opioid abuse or use disorder. And MAT significantly reduces illicit opioid use compared to non-drug approaches. Next slide. Okay. For BJA, any applicant seeking funds to implement or enhance their drug court shall not deny any eligible client access to drug court program because of their use of FDA-approved medications for the treatment of drug abuse. And BJA supports access to appropriate MAT under the care and prescription of a physician, and this access extends to participants participating in BJA-funded drug courts. And all BJA drug court grantees are expected to be able to provide MAT-related treatment to any participant with an opioid addiction to the extent MAT is clinically indicated. And under no circumstances may a drug court judge, other judicial official, correctional supervision officer, or any other staff connected to the identified drug court deny the use of these medications when made available to the client under the care of a properly authorized physician. Next slide. And then lastly, the BJA Collaborative. Through BJA funding, we have 4 TTA providers that provide a variety of technical assistance. They're called RTA Collaborative. That's NADCP, CCI, American University, who's hosting this training today, as well as TLPI. NADCP through that special condition, which we have for our grantees as well as our TTA providers. They're updating their websites, they're updating their training curriculum through NADCP to include addressing the opioid crisis. CCI has updated their website as well as their online training systems to address the issue and make sure that we're getting technical assistance and education out to the field. American University obviously doing this webinar, updating their website, as well as doing podcasts, and TLPI also updating their website. So each of our TTA providers are tasked with doing various things to address the opioid crisis through their training and technical assistance. Next slide. And that concludes my aspect of BJA and talking about the drug court. I'll pass it on to Tim Jeffries, who's the Senior Policy Advisor, to talk about his work with COPE.
Thank you, Greg, and can everyone hear me, I hope? And Greg provided a great overview of the opioid epidemic and crisis. I'm Tim Jeffries, as was mentioned earlier. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Drug Policy within the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and I'm really glad that they've created this new position of Senior Policy Advisor for Drug Policy to really wrap our heads around how to provide an appropriate response to the opioid epidemic. We can go to the next slide, please. Just want to give a little bit of an overview of who we are in BJA, and I think that's extremely important. We are made up of the policy, the programs, the planning, and the public safety officers benefits divisions. And Greg, as you just heard from Turay and myself, are in the policy division. One of the key primary roles that we are responsible for is providing national training and technical assistance, as well as leadership in the areas of substance use reduction and opioid abuse awareness. We also don't do this alone. I want you to know that we collaborate with multiple federal partners, as well as public and private entities and national organizations. In addition to that, we frequently interact with the Office of National Drug Control Policy at the White House for guidance on how to establish a roadmap to address the opioid epidemic, as well as other drug policy specific issues. The programs division, I want to just, if we could back up a little bit, the programs division is also responsible for managing the grantees, and they are direct access with the grantees and are able to assist you with any of your needs specific to any training and technical assistance that the policy division establishes. The planning division really is responsible for looking at the appropriate budget and aligning performance measures to ensure that each of the grantees is in compliance with their expected grant responsibilities and also performing to the best that they can. And a little bit about the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program. They are the ones directly providing benefits to our fallen firefighters. So that is our fourth leg of who we are within BJA. Really quickly, I want to just let you know that we will touch on the new drug policy portfolio, which we're calling COPE, Comprehensive Opioid Abuse Program. If you hear that, that came from the CARA legislation. And just to let you know that it came from what we call the Sequential Intercept model, which we coined from another entity. And let me tell you how we came about from COPE. We developed COPE from establishing a listening session with key federal, public, and private partners to establish what the greatest need of federal funding to combat the opioid crisis would be. We determined that along the Sequential Intercept model, which you see the grant programs here that are listed, you heard Greg mention drug courts. We also have the Law Enforcement Diversion, Corrections, Second Chance Act, Reentry, and Swift, Certain, and Fair Hope 6 projects that fall along a continuum under what we call Sequential Intercept. We wanted to provide funding under COPE to let you know that we want to meet each individual jurisdiction wherever their needs are. We can go to the next slide, please. Here is an actual demo or a visual of the Sequential Intercept model, and it really nicely displays the actual categories for our COPE solicitation. If you look under the bottom in the blue, you're seeing the COPE categories 1 through 6. And these are the ones we released an entire brand new application for, and I'll go into detail about that in just a little bit. I want you to see across the top from the left where you see Intercept 0 going all the way to the right where you see Intercept 5. It specifically outlines where folks come into the criminal justice system and need a type of intervention, whether it's prevention, which is primarily dealing with law enforcement, and maybe a Naloxone Plus initiative, to then Intercept 1, which is more of the law enforcement providing responses before they're involved in the court. Moving to Intercepts 2 and 3, where you're looking at detention and court hearings, where we're looking at prosecution and innovative solutions, to the Intercept 3, where you just heard Greg really detail the need under the BJA Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program, combined with the RSAT program, which is Residential Substance Abuse Treatment, and moving into Intercepts 4 and 5, which are the reentry and community corrections. So we've identified the programs along those intercepts, and these categories are kind of along those programs. We can move to the next slide, please. Here's just a recap. I mentioned to you before that under the COPE solicitation, it was $27 million. We received about 191 applications, which is quite substantial under these different 6 categories. So what you see here in red is who we awarded, not who applied, but who we awarded of those 191 applications, with about 50 awards made under these. The bulk of the applications came in, I must admit, under that category 1, which we call overdose outreach projects, or the Naloxone Plus programs. Just a little bit about category 2. Those were for statewide projects. States that have rural communities and wanted to assist up to 3 different rural jurisdictions with technology assistance under some of those evidence-based components that you heard Greg mention before. 3, system-level diversion and alternatives to incarceration. We made 8 awards in that category, and that's where you're really going to look at the drug courts that are looking at working with other probation departments or other community reentry programs under a continuum. So it must be more than one intercept working with a drug court or other type of program under that category. Under number 4, category 4, it was statewide planning and coordination. 5 awards were made under that category, and we definitely identified that there was a need for states to figure out how to set up their systems to communicate with each other. For example, you might have a state administrative agent that didn't know how to communicate with the state administering agency at HHS, didn't know how to pull information from any type of insurance to afford this medication-assisted treatment, with the release of folks from either prisons or jails. And that statewide planning and coordination really proved to be helpful, or could prove to be helpful, with funds to do that. Categories 5 and 6 are ones that we're not new. Categories 1 through 4 were all brand new. We absorbed the prescription drug monitoring programs under the COPE solicitation. So now you're just seeing 5 and 6, which are pre-existing ones, PDNP, either the implementation enhancements, or number 6, which is the data-driven responses to opioid abuse. So now you've seen a snapshot of the COPE solicitations. I'm going to now talk a little bit about the COPE TTA categories. Under the Category A, we have a COPE TTA network. And once again, we selected 4 brand new providers along with the grantees to assist the grantees with training and technical assistance. We're also assisting non-grantees, and we're prioritizing based on the highest level of need, just to let you know that. So under A, we have the COPE Network TTA provider. That was an award made to the Institute for Intergovernmental Research. Please note that all of these are 24-month programs, so for the next 2 years, you're able to use each and any of these providers. We're really excited about the network provider because they're establishing a resource center or a website that you'll be able to access with all things for COPE or all things for opioid services that BJA offers. And I believe we're planning on establishing that by early April. Category B, what we consider the national TTA provider. They are the forefront of all opioid COPE TTA, and that was for the Advocates for Human Potential, who have subbed out subawards to our task organizations and the Center for Application of Substance Abuse Technology. And we're excited to work with those teams as well. Category C, or the National TTA Peer Recovery Support Services. We've done had a lot of discussion with our partners at SAMHSA and HHS, who've taken the lead on peer recovery support, and we pulled from the great work that they've done to establish a national TTA center for peer recovery support. We'll be bringing in peer models or best practices models and soliciting the field for those models to serve as examples of how peer recovery programs should really be effective. And look for that towards the end of the year. In addition to that, we're pulling together a national conference for just peer recovery support, hopefully in late October or early November. And the last one is the prescription drug monitoring. If we could back up one time, the prescription drug monitoring TTA provider, who is the Brandeis University TTA provider who was working with PDNPs prior, and they received the recompete award. Next slide, please. Just wanted to mention briefly, under the observations, what did we see from those 191 applications that came in under the COPE? The categories 1 through 4 were the greater demand, and we only funded 20% of the awards that came in, which is not that much. The Naloxone Plus, as I mentioned earlier, that category 1, we saw the bulk of the applications that came in, which we're looking at. A lot of law enforcement officers are now needing assistance with figuring out how to provide treatment to these opioid populations that they're seeing on the street. We prioritize public health and public safety partnerships and also to nonprofit involvement. So just wanted to let you know that that was a key area of interest. Also, we had an interest in data. So we looked at what data you were presenting to display your greatest need for opioids, and as well as what were the opioid overdose rates in your community, and use that to determine who had the greatest need to address the opioid issue that we're currently seeing. And the last thing, based on our appropriation, our authorizing language from Congress, we had to prioritize rural communities, and that's one of the things you'll see in the technology sections, that we had to look at those communities that had a rural jurisdiction that they were trying to assist, especially given the fact that the rural communities were either harder hit or did not have access to those evidence-based services. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that there were research partners involved, and when we're looking at some of those awards, we awarded those jurisdictions that had a university or some type of research partner that would be involved with the project. And that's the end of the presentation. I hope that it was very beneficial, and if you have any questions, I'll certainly address them at the end of this webinar. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Emily.
Great. Thank you, Tim and Greg. That was very interesting, and it's great to see the significant resources that BJA is devoting towards this important topic. Next up, we have Emil Afsa and Jane Kavanaugh. Mr. Afsa serves as statewide task coordinator for the judiciary of the state of New Jersey. He is responsible for the clinical supervision, credentialing, and clinical oversight of the substance abuse evaluators working in the courts throughout New Jersey. Emil has extensive experience working in both mental health and addictions treatment, including multiple levels of care and treatment modalities. Ms. Kavanaugh serves as statewide task coordinator for the New Jersey Administrative Office of the Courts and is an approved instructor for the Addiction Professionals Certification Board of New Jersey. Jane has been employed as a clinician in the addictions field since 1983 and has worked for the New Jersey Drug Court since 2007. Happy to have you with us today, Emil and Jane. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that. I'm Emil. Jane's here with me. We're going to be alternating back and forth as we go through the information on the screen. Just a little brief thing about New Jersey. We are very unique in having court-employed substance abuse evaluators throughout the state. We currently have 64 working in New Jersey. So they actually provide the evaluations and treatment recommendations for the courts and their court employees. The presentation we're going to be doing, we actually conducted versions of this the last 2 years at NADCP's national conference. So this is going to be a much more condensed down because that's an hour and 15-minute presentation, and I think we have about 15 minutes here. So we're going to go through this as quickly as possible and hopefully not speak extremely fast as we are people from New Jersey. So let's move to the next slide, please. So obviously here is a graph of New Jersey heroin and morphine deaths. We saw that in the earlier slides in this presentation. Nationally, you're just seeing the increase. So we know overdose is definitely becoming a problem, and that scale is going in the wrong directions. Next slide, please.
What we wanted to show in this slide is that even though the rest of the country is starting to experience opioids as a significant problem, here in New Jersey we've been tracking drug of choice outcomes for quite some time, and as far back as 2007 when we first started drawing drug of choice stats, opioids were an issue back then. Our stats have never been low. As you can see, we tend to run around 50% of our applicants to drug court, and our court clients are opioid primary. We believe the numbers are actually even a little bit higher than that. Next slide. So if we talk about persons who are at risk for opioid overdose, first off, people who use opioids are at heightened risk for overdose just because of the nature of the substance. And that doesn't matter whether the opioids are prescribed and the person's taking it for pain management or they're getting it off the street. Depending how they're used and how they're combined and what types of medication, there's no exact cross-tolerance between opioids, so even someone who's using it legitimately can be in a risk for overdose. What we do find, too, is that even with detoxification, people are at higher risk because once someone stops using the likelihood of overdose increases. As we saw at a workshop in 2015, you can see the bottom 2 bullets speak about that. Next slide, please. Extended abstinence is a factor. The brain begins to recover very quickly from opioid use, and the tolerance drops. So someone can come back out of abstinence and use the exact same amount they were using prior, and this time it causes them to overdose instead of just getting high. Also, mixing substances with opioids heightens the risk as well. Next slide. If we take a look at MAT, even though MAT is used to reduce cravings, some of that MAT use can actually foster increases in overdose. As I mentioned earlier, the tolerance drops with use, so if someone is able to maintain abstinence on an MAT when they return to using, they're at heightened risk for overdose. Folks that use Vivitrol blocks the opiate high. However, that blockade can be overrun by using too many opiates, and that also can cause an overdose, as well as the synergistic effects when we take a look at methadone. When you combine methadone with other types of drugs, it heightens the risk of overdose. the adulterants that are being used by drug dealers to augment heroin is also poses high risk. Next slide.
Okay, so on this list here, what we're looking at is New Jersey State Police. They every time they collect evidence from any sort of drug bust, they test it to see what's in it. Obviously, we see a lot of fentanyl throughout. Carfentanil was actually a recent introduction, so we saw that for the first time in October of last year. It was found in Monmouth County. It was actually some counterfeit pills made to look like oxycodone, but it was carfentanil. So I'm sure it's spreading across the country. We were just waiting to see when it was going to hit New Jersey. So we did actually see it for the first time last October. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, symptoms of an overdose real quick: slow and shallow breathing, very sleepy, unable to talk, or unconscious. Skin color is blue or grayish, so you get that kind of off-colored skin with dark lips and fingernails. That's because oxygen's not flowing. Snoring or gurgling sound. So that snoring or gurgling sound, a lot of times people refer to as a death rattle. So it's that kind of sound. It's almost like snoring. It's not the person snoring. It's because they may actually be in an overdose. Next slide, please. If there's symptoms of an overdose, lightly tap, shake, and shout at the person to get a response. Still no response, rub knuckles on the breastbone. If you've ever seen that done by doctors, when you're rubbing on someone's breastbone, it's very uncomfortable. So if the person is alert or conscious, they will respond to pain. If not, if they're not responding to that, then obviously they're unconscious. If the person responds, keep them awake. You always want to call 911. We're going to talk about the Good Samaritan law a little further along in our presentation, but that's also one aspect of this. Call 911 and stay with the person. Next slide, please.
After you call 911, if you're unable to resuscitate the person, you want to consider rescue breathing and do some rescue breathing, and you also want to administer CPR if you're able to. You have that ability. You want to stay with the person. There's a high likelihood that they may be vomiting, and you want to make sure you put them on their side so that they don't breathe back in the vomiting. If you have Naloxone, you want to administer the Naloxone as well. Next slide. Naloxone comes under the brand name of Narcan, and it's now available in 41 states without a prescription. Friends and family members of opioid addicts can actually go to certain pharmacies, certain stores, and obtain that. If you're not sure whether or not your state allows the over-the-counter use of Naloxone, you can go on CVS's website or other drugstore websites and see whether or not you're eligible. Next slide. And answering the question of whether or not lay people are able to administer Naloxone, in New Jersey you can, and we began doing that back in April of 2014. And even within the first 8 months of administering it, over 3,000 lives were saved and by overdose being reversed from the use of Narcan. So find out whether or not your state allows for laypersons to be administering it. Next slide.
Okay, so New Jersey Overdose Prevention Act. A lot of states have similar laws, so you just want to check online to see if your state has something similar. The idea behind this is we also often had, especially since we work with drug court in the courts, you have someone that's committed a crime and they're worried about staying with someone who's overdosing, so they just leave the person there, don't call 911. This law was created so people can call 911, they could stay with the person and not worry about being charged with having possession of drugs or have it cause a problem with their probation or parole. So the idea was to have people getting help. Next slide, please. This is stats from New Jersey's third quarter of 2016 Naloxone administrations. So you see that little pie there. Emergency personnel is on the left side with 2,074. Law enforcement is on the right side. So we have plenty of law enforcement people who are now carrying it in New Jersey that they are the first people on the scene, so they're able to intervene and administer the first dose of Narcan. Next slide, please. This slide points out some of the stats they're tracking. What I want to make note of here is you see an increase of Naloxone being administered on the weekends, and you also see between 5 p.m. and midnight an increase of it. So they're tracking how many, and during that time period, we're averaging 33 Narcans per day. Next slide, please.
Simply surviving an overdose may not be the end of the road for folks. They're finding that there's extended medical results that come medical complications that come even when people survive an overdose. If you read the footnote, I would encourage you to look up that article online and read it. It talks about the risk of kidney failure from the body being in the same position during an overdose and the kidney, the byproducts starting to break down, tissue starting to break down, causing kidney failure. It talks about aspiration back into the lungs. For example, if someone's vomiting, they can end up with pneumonia as a result of breathing back in. The lungs become, at some point, so waterlogged that they can't even get oxygen, even when they are able to breathe. Next slide, please. We want to pay attention also to something called Compartment Syndrome, which is recently becoming known. When someone's been laying in one position for an extended period of time, as generally happens in an overdose, certain limbs, the blood supply can be cut off, whether an arm or leg being folded under or whatever, and there's that part of the body essentially becomes dead, no longer able to be used. Oftentimes it needs to be amputated. Even in cases where there's no direct damage, something like frostbite, broken bones, head trauma, and so forth can result, especially now that fentanyl is coming in. There's more falling, more symptoms along those lines. And what they're finding, too, is they're equating with the brain damage with traumatic brain injury. And sometimes people recover from it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the damage is permanent. Next slide.
Okay, overdose prevention measures with MAT. So we're hearing a lot of discussions about MAT and the treatment of opioid use disorders. Counseling is recommended with all forms of MAT. We want to make sure people are not just receiving medications, they're also receiving counseling services. MAT providers out there, you got to make sure you're educating your clients on overdose prevention, providing them all sorts of information. The SAMHSA MAT Pocket Guide is a good resource for clinicians. Client testing positive for substances should be reassessed for the right level of care. So if someone's on an MAT and using other substances, particularly when you're looking at benzodiazepines and other types of sedative hypnotics, maybe a reason to discontinue the MAT. So we have to watch about them using other substances and synergistic effect of it. When clients discontinue use of an MAT, we also want to be very mindful to monitor them closely, whether it's by choice that someone decides to come off of it, or if they're just administratively discharged. They're at greater risk, as Jane mentioned earlier. Their tolerance has decreased, so now they're at greater risk if they decide to start using again. Next slide, please. Don't forget, guys, keep in mind medications out there. New Jersey has a huge system with the police departments as far as prescription drop boxes. We want to make sure we're not keeping those old prescriptions from back injuries or car injuries in the medicine cabinet, because as we've seen in New Jersey, and particularly certain counties, that's where the kids were starting off with the opioid use, was taking prescriptions. I did want to note, I saw an article this morning that Walmart is giving out, I believe it's called Dispose RX. When they give someone a prescription for opioids, they're also giving them this substance that they put into the prescription bottle with leftover medications, add some hot water, and it makes it into an inorganic. They can just toss it right out and you can't use the prescription. So we want to make it easier and easier for people to not leave medication sitting in the cabinets for relatives, kids, other people to pick up and use. Next slide, please.
Next slide. Here at our Justice Complex, last year the Attorney General's office actually did a prescription drop-off. Next slide. Prescription drug monitoring, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, is also really important. With our drug court participants, we may not have direct access to monitoring prescription for clients that are doctor shopping, but the treatment providers, the physicians there can. And in New Jersey, we actually coordinate with 12 other states. Next slide.
Next slide. Okay, so the central office, that's where Jane and I work out of. It's the administrative office of the courts for New Jersey, so we oversee all the county courthouses. Acting director of the court sent out a memo urging all courts to recognize International Overdose Awareness Day. August 31st is the International Overdose Awareness Day for those who aren't aware of that. Jane and I provided a list of suggestions to our teams throughout the state for things they could do to bring awareness to it. We held a training that was an hour and 15 minutes, a longer version of this that was Skyped to all the courthouses around the state. And our acting director actually wrote an overdose awareness article for the drug court newsletter. Next slide, please. This picture in particular, this is the main entrance to the administrative office of the courts. This is actually where the state Supreme Court is. Those footprints were right at the main lobby, so that's actually one floor up looking down. It is 132 sets of footprints that were to symbolize the estimated number of people that were to die of an overdose in August of that year. Next slide, please. Here's some additional information that was included by the footprints regarding overdose. Next slide, please.
Within the 21 counties in New Jersey, all of the substance abuse evaluators that we work with presented overdose awareness presentations. Some of them did passed out ribbons. Silver ribbons are the symbol of a life lost too soon to overdose. Others passed out prevention information. Others did moments of silence in the courthouse and so forth to commemorate the lost. Next slide, please. This is a poster that one of our courthouses used. They invited drug court participants to come up and sign the poster if they were committing to no overdoses within the next year. Spontaneously, people started also writing on tribute names of people that they knew who had died of opioid overdose. Next slide. One of our other courthouses had the parents of an overdose victim come in and speak to the other drug court participants. It was very moving. It might as well have been their own parents speaking. Next slide. And we just wanted to show that prevention also doesn't have to be complicated. We believe that opioid overdose is 100% preventable, and it can be as simple as this kind of outreach where they had a big bowl full of colorful candy and people came over because of the candy and at the same time got literature on opioid overdose prevention. Next slide.
Somerset County, they actually had a rash of overdose happening in the springtime. So rather than wait till August when we do our overdose presentation stuff statewide, they actually did the presentation earlier to prevent more overdoses. Next slide, please. Essex County, we had a participant shared his own experience about being brought back with Naloxone multiple times and shared how difficult the whole experience was. It was very impactful for the other participants in drug court to hear his own experience. Next slide, please. Morris County, there's a nice park right in the middle of town. They actually did a presentation there for the public. You can see from that picture that a great audience show up, and there was a lot of people really engaged by that. Next slide, please.
We have a grassroots organization in New Jersey called the Municipal Alliance, and they fund grassroots efforts for prevention. They issued a proclamation last year about Opioid Overdose Awareness Day so that they were encouraging everyone in the state to recognize it. Next slide. And we wanted folks to have some do's and don'ts with regard to opioid overdose. You do want to do rescue breathing. You do want to administer naloxone. You do want to place people in a recovery position and stay with them if you believe they're in overdose. We don't want to try to be aggressive with them or try to revive them or any of the old myths of cold shower or injecting something else into their veins. If you do administer naloxone, you want to know that there's expiration dates on the kits. Next slide, please. Some summary points for opioid users. Basically, we want people to stay in recovery and work their recovery, not commit any new offenses because people can't live against their own value system and stay clean and sober. We want them to educate those around them with respect to opioid overdose, give them a Save a Life card, which we have a resource for at the end of this we can give you, and also educate their significant others about opioid overdose risk. And to reach out to someone when they first start thinking about using and knowing that they are innately valuable and that they as an individual matter to us. Next slide. Okay, so some things you can do. You can create a form for this PowerPoint. Now, the one we just went over, Jane and I, is a much more condensed version of the bigger presentation we did for the NADCP conference. If you email us, and our email addresses will be on the next slide, we will actually send you a full PDF. It has some spots in there where you can edit it for information for your own state. It'll be very easy. We did all the work for you. You just plug in some of your own individual information, and you could utilize this PowerPoint for your own presentations in your area. Wear a silver ribbon. There's a bunch of other options there on this slide that you can see for things to do. Next slide, please. And then there you go. There's the email address for Jane and me. Send us an email. We'll get you the information. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share this information with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both, Emil and Jane, for sharing that important information and highlighting the steps that treatment courts can take to raise awareness of the dangers of opioid overdose. Next up, we have Jeff Smith and Judge Craig Hanna. Mr. Smith is a project director for the 8th Judicial District. He's been the project director and/or coordinator for multiple courts within the 8th District since 1996. Currently, Jeff is assisting with the development and operation of all problem-solving courts within the 8th District. He continues to be a member of several planning initiatives within New York State and the 8th District, including the planning and implementation for the Opiate Intervention Court in the City of Buffalo. Judge Craig Hanna currently presides over the Adolescent Diversion and Opiate Intervention Courts, to which he was appointed in January 2017. Judge Hanna also serves as a supervising judge over Tonawanda and North Tonawanda City Courts. In addition to his work on the bench, Judge Hanna is an adjunct professor at the State University at Buffalo Law School, where he lectures on trial advocacy and procedure. Thank you both for joining us today. The floor is all yours, Jeff.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having us. And if we could go to the next slide, thank you. This calendar, this drug court calendar that we call the Opiate Intervention Court, was created solely due to an old model we had been following for quite some time called the Sequential Intercept model. We found that we were no longer meeting our defendants in a short period of time before they were overdosing. And then what I'm trying to say is that at arraignment, we are now taking individuals and bringing them into the opiate intervention calendar so that these individuals can have the intervention that's necessary and move them into a traditional drug court. Opiate intervention calendar only works because we have a working drug court in the City of Buffalo. Next slide. What we were able to do is create a new docket with a separate judge from that of our traditional drug court and allow for individuals that were screened in lockup the previous evening to come into an arraignment part that immediately access services that would allow for medically assisted treatment, would allow for group counseling, individual counseling, inpatient treatment, and most importantly, have them linked with the treatment providers within a 24-hour period. Next slide. Our goals are written there on the slide: reducing opiate overdose rates, incidents and deaths, reducing participant recidivism, increased program completion rates. But the long and the short of it is this calendar was created solely for one purpose, and that was to allow individuals to continue to breathe while they went through the criminal justice system and ideally get the services they need so that we no longer had any deaths due to overdose. Next slide. You'll see that there's a rapid integration approach. And the rapid integration approach, I am happy to say, as of today's date, now allows for every participant that is considered medically appropriate for medically assisted treatment to receive their medication within 24 hours. We no longer have a 2, 3, 4-week wait for individuals to receive some form of medically assisted treatment. We have the providers in the courtroom at arraignment, and by the following day, they have seen a physician and have began their medication regimen. Because of this, we are happy to say that since the inception of this court on May 1st, there has been 1 death within the court due to overdose. There's been 0 deaths otherwise, but we've had 1 for overdose, and quite honestly, that 1 is unacceptable. Next slide. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Judge Craig Hanna. Judge Hanna has been with this court since it opened. He will be able to tell you why he does what he does, but most importantly, why we are being so successful right now in the City of Buffalo. We have multiple projects that are to begin this spring that will incorporate the rest of the county and in turn also incorporate the rest of the district, which will be 7 other counties here in Western New York. I thank you for all of your time, and here's Judge Hanna.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, this is Craig Hanna. I would just like to thank the Bureau of Justice Assistance, American University, and the other panelists for hosting and participating in this webinar. I have a lot of information, but I want to just cut to the chase and piggyback on something what our project director said. Our goal is to save lives, and it sounds kind of Now sounds kind of succinct, but that's our main goal, is to try to make sure our participants are there and aware for their next court date. We have a 10-step or 10-prong analysis. I will try to get through this as many as possible, but I'll go through it fast because I know we're running short on time, and then I'll go through each one in greater detail if time allows. First, we like to divert the participants right at arraignment at that first critical stage. Second, as Mr. Smith says, we place the individual in medically assisted treatment within hours instead of days. Third, we hold the criminal charges in abeyance while we focus on the person, and we try to treat the whole person, so when they leave our court, they're a lot better situated than they first came in. Fourth, we play by Vegas rules, meaning that what happens in the courtroom stays in the courtroom. Honesty is more important than relapse. We want to make sure that they're honest and open with us so we can get them the assistance that they need. Fifth, we link them with ancillary services. We know some individuals don't have driver's licenses, some doesn't have access to housing or transportation. We try to assist those other needs so they can be successful in their recovery and successful in their treatment. Six, we have a curfew where we try to manage their time. Each participant must be in by 8 o'clock unless they're participating in some sober living activities. We want to make sure we limit their time and limit their access so they cannot be able to reuse. Seventh, we do random drug testing, and as all of us know in this field, random drug testing is the gold standard, and we make sure our individuals are tested regularly. And our court is almost not random because we see them almost every day, so they almost know that they have a drug test coming, but it's basically just to know where they are, what they're using, and we can assist them with the right treatment and right treatment protocols. Eighth, we do random wellness checks where we have the sheriff and probation go to their house to make sure individuals are doing what they're supposed to do. 9, we use daily face-to-face contact. We like to put eyes on our participants to make sure that they're not using and make sure they're actually going to treatment, and make sure we have that continual dialogue and uplift them to let them know that not only I, but the whole treatment staff and team cares about their well-being, and to make sure we can get them back on process. 10th, we use control dates. Control dates, in a nutshell, is to make sure that while we're doing intervention, and this goes between 30 and 60 days pertaining on the participant, that we have their criminal matter working out in their absence. We're trying to make sure the defense attorneys and the prosecutors are meeting regularly during this intervention phase, so at the conclusion we can successfully have the matter transferred to a traditional-based drug court or have it transferred to a traditional drug intervention program. Again, I know we're running short on time, and we did ask to leave time for questioning. But I do want to highlight on the most important one is honesty. We look at our intervention court as more of a triage. It's like the individuals are going to an emergency room. And at an emergency room, you have to be honest and open with your treatment provider or with your doctor so you can get the right assistance that you need. At this point, we know that relapse, and anyone in this field knows that relapse is a normal part of recovery, and we don't try to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Our job is to make sure that we encourage our participants to make sure they have family linkages and stay in contact with everyone, and to make sure we give them the skills that they need so when they leave our courtroom, they're in a lot better situation than they first come in. And again, I can talk for an hour without taking a breath, and I know we're running short on time, and we want to leave time for questioning. But I think, first I want to thank the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and particularly Greg Turay, for lending their resources, helping with the implementation of our program and training of our staff. I'd like to thank the American University and the other panelists for assisting in this important and worthwhile webinar. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our facilitator, Steve Collins, so we can open up to questions for our participants.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge Hanna and Jeff, for that intriguing look into the Buffalo Opioid Intervention Court and the great work you're doing to help those at risk of overdose. Before we move into the question and answer section of the webinar, I want to quickly highlight the Resource Center's next webinar. Later this April, we will be conducting a webinar on the role of law enforcement in drug courts. This webinar follows our other role of webinars we've done in the past and is aimed at helping drug courts better understand the role that law enforcement can play in the drug court setting. Once the date for the webinar has been set, it will be posted on the Resource Center website as well, and as well as on the monthly Resource Center newsletter. All right, with that, it looks like we have a few minutes for questions and answers. And the first question is for Tim and possibly Greg. And the question is, will any of the 2018 grants allow for police, probation, and/or first responders to purchase drug detection technology, specifically because of illnesses from fentanyl, and also personal protective gear?
I don't know, Tim, do you want to take that? I think for the drug court, I mean, I'm specifically working with the drug court. That wouldn't be anything that's currently in the drug court discretionary grant. But I don't know if you want to take that, Tim.
Yeah, and our funds under the COPE solicitation are primarily for law enforcement plus treatment. So it's connecting the law enforcement officer and the person that they've apprehended with some sort of treatment option, whether it is an assessment, whether it is some type of counselor or licensed clinician to identify the needs of that person that they see on the street and divert them from any type of arrest. So that's primarily that category 1 area of funding. So equipment is not necessarily what we would have prioritized in either the drug court or the COPE solicitation. But I will say this, under the BURN discretionary grant funding, BURN JAG funding, there are purpose areas for equipment that would assist under this law enforcement type of initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Great,
and we
thank
can
you.
get you information on that BURN discretionary grant or BURN formulas grant solicitation if you need more information on how to get funds for those categories.
Great, thank you, Tim and Greg. The next question is for Emil or Jane. How and where are you testing drug samples in New Jersey? Are they all in the lab? Are you doing field testing? And if you're doing field testing, how does your department get the money for safe testing devices?
That's an interesting question. There is lab testing done. We do have state labs we use another company for it, and there is field testing also done. Budgeting-wise, I'm not sure. Sounds like the question was regarding budgeting for our services. The drug court has a budget. The one thing New Jersey's been very fortunate about is the legislation has been generous with paying for the services because of the outcomes that we have. So we do get a lot of funding through the state. I don't know if that answers the question. New Jersey's just very fortunate.
Thank you, Emil and Jane. That was great. It looks like at this point we're just about out of time, and it looks like we're about out of questions as well. I would just like to take a minute to thank all of today's presenters. The information and guidance you have provided is invaluable as jurisdictions across the country continue to deal with this serious issue. I'd like to also thank everyone who attended today's webinar. I hope it was interesting and provided you with some ideas and/or innovative steps that can be taken back to your own jurisdiction. Lastly, we'd appreciate it if you could fill out the brief survey that will appear in your web browser shortly. It should only take a minute and will help us improve future webinars. If you have a question that we are not able to get to, or you think of a question later, please feel free to submit those to us. You can do so as part of the survey, or you can send us an email at ndcrc@american.edu. Thank you again for attending, and to our wonderful presenters, have a great day.